Good morning and welcome to the National Press Theatre. I'm Stephanie Levis with the Globe and Mail. I will be moderating today's press conference. Just before we begin, for the folks in the room, to prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents, if you're using an earpiece, please keep it away from the microphone at all times. We are joined today by the Transportation Safety Board, who I believe have some opening remarks related to their report and their findings. We will move then to questions. We do have participants online today, so I will ask my colleagues online, please use the raised hand function on Zoom if you have a question, and I will call on you when we get to that portion of today. Over to you.
And thank you for joining us. We're here today to present the findings of our investigation into the 2023 main track collision and derailment of a Canadian National Railway Company light engine train and a Réseau de Transport Métropolitain commuter train in Montreal, Quebec. As a result of this investigation, we are reiterating one existing recommendation and issuing a new one to Transport Canada to mitigate the risks associated with train crews failing to comply with railway signals. I'll turn it over to Mr. Regis, who will walk you through the sequence of events surrounding the occurrence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marier. So on November 21st, 2023, CN Train 376 was traveling south on the St. Laurent subdivision when it collided with the tail end of a stationary commuter train, EXO 1212, at the St. Leonard Montreal North station. 4 of the 8 passengers and 2 crew members on board the EXO train were injured. Prior to the collision, the CN train had passed a restricting signal, meaning that the crew had to be prepared to stop short of another train anywhere in the block ahead, up to a maximum speed of 15 miles per hour until the next signal. In railway operations, signals work in sequence, meaning that each one provides an indication based on what the next signal is expected to display. The CN crew likely assumed that the block ahead was clear and expected that the next signal would be permissive. Possibly acting on this assumption, they did not slow down. Instead, they accelerated to 41 miles per hour, which is 26 miles per hour over the limit. This expectation, however, proved to be incorrect. Due to the station's ambient lighting and the railway signals beyond it, the end of train marker lights on the EXO commuter train only became visible when the CN lead locomotive was just over 500 feet away. The locomotive engineer initiated an emergency brake application. However, at that distance and speed, the collision was unavoidable. Our investigations determined that while the crew verbally acknowledged signal indications among themselves, they did not adhere to the restricted speed and did not discuss the restriction as required by operating procedures. When TSB investigators reviewed the locomotive voice and video recorder, they found that both cameras inside the cab had been intentionally obstructed by sheets of paper. This hindered the ability to fully analyze what was happening inside the cab before the collision. The safety issues identified in these investigations are not isolated. They reflect long-standing systemic vulnerabilities in Canada's rail transportation system that have persisted for over 2 decades. Since 2023, the TSB has launched 8 investigations into occurrences involving the absence of additional physical fail-safe defenses. This occurrence is yet another example of the risks that arise when there are no safeguards in place to protect against signals not being followed. I will turn over to Mr. Marier, who will speak about the board's recommendation.
For nearly 25 years, the TSB has called for the implementation of physical fail-safe defenses for trains operating in Canada. These defenses automatically intervene to slow or stop a train when a crew does not respond to signal indications. They can also protect against overspeed derailments, incursions into work zones, and main track switches left in the wrong position. The United States took concrete action after a serious train collision in California in 2008, mandating a physical fail-safe train control system on high-hazard routes. Canadian trains that go to the US must be equipped to work with this system. Yet here in Canada, the industry continues to rely slowly on administrative defenses, such as regulations, instructions, and procedures, leaving safety dependent on human performance. Without strong physical safeguards, the risk of collisions remains alarmingly high. In 2000 and 2013, the TSB issued recommendations urging Transport Canada to mandate physical fail-safe defenses. It wasn't until 2022 that Transport Canada announced its intent to require such technology, known as enhanced train control, on our country's highest risk corridors. While that was a step forward, progress since has been limited. The same year, following a 2019 main track collision between two CN trains in Manitoba, the TSB issued a recommendation calling on Transport Canada to require major Canadian railways to expedite the implementation of physical fail-safe train controls on Canada's high-speed rail corridors and on all key routes. To date, Transport Canada has not yet completed many of the key steps, including critical actions, such as conducting corridor risk assessments. That's why we are here today, to stress the importance of this recommendation. The frequency of occurrences involving crews not following signal indications is not decreasing. Therefore, we strongly urge Transport Canada to prioritize the deployment of these critical safety defenses. Given the complexity of the work that remains, full implementation of a physical fail-safe system is still years away. More concerning, however, is that there are no government-mandated interim safety measures in place while the system is being developed, leaving trains at risk of collision or derailments when other defenses, such as signal compliance, fail. This is a serious gap in safety, one that, in the best-case scenario, will remain for many years, and it cannot be ignored. Therefore, the board recommends that Transport Canada immediately implement additional interim measures to mitigate the risks associated with train crews not complying with railway signal indications, such as collisions between trains, until adequate and permanent physical fail-safe defenses are implemented. This collision occurred on a key route, one that carries both daily passenger traffic and freight trains transporting dangerous goods. And yet, no physical backup defenses were in place to stop it. The outcome could have been far more devastating. This incident is a stark reminder of the risks at stake and the urgent need for stronger safeguards. We cannot continue relying solely on human performance. Even if a physical fail-safe system is still years away, Canadians cannot afford to wait. Thank you.
Et maintenant, on peut prendre les questions. Again, my colleagues online use the raised hand function for Zoom. I will unmute you, and we will begin with Eric Atkins with the Globe and Mail. It's one question, one follow-up. Go ahead, Eric.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, no problem.
Thank you. So I assume you're talking about positive train control when you talk about the fail-safe systems used in the U.S.?
Positive train control is the name of the system that was implemented in the U.S. The Canadian version of it won't be necessarily called positive train control, so it is the U.S. name of the system, yeah.
Okay, thanks. And can you tell us more about how that would have prevented this collision?
In the case of PTC system in the United States, it operates as kind of a bubble around the train, and from the tail end to the head end of the train. And all those bubbles, every train is a bubble, so all those bubbles are connected to central servers using GPS and radio waves. So all those bubbles are being managed by the system, and the system is always looking for none of the bubbles to be touching one another. And if they need to be touching, if there needs to be interactions between two trains, it is done under very specific controls, very specific methods, and all is under the PTC system that will intervene if any of those conditions are not met.
Thank you.
Do any of the other reporters online have a question? Okay, I see none. I take that back. Hold on. We have Rowan Kennedy with CBC. Go ahead, Rowan.
Good morning. You mentioned that there were sheets of paper that were covering cameras inside of the conductor's cabin. Can you give us more details? Can you give me a sense of maybe why that is? Was there any investigation into that? Do you understand why they did that?
We found the camera system inside the locomotive, the CN locomotive, had been tampered with. So yes, there was sheets of paper put underneath the camera, so they were rendered ineffective. The microphones, though, were still working, so we got to hear the conversations inside the locomotive cabin. We cannot say actually this is the crew that put those sheets of paper in place. It might have been there for quite a while. The system automatically goes into a loop each and every 48 hours. So, the LVVR system, the locomotive voice and video recorder, has been challenged right now by the industry, by the mainly by the unions, and this is the first time we've seen this event took place. Though I know that Transport Canada has confirmed they've been doing a lot of inspections in those LVVR systems since their inception in September 2022. And this was the first occurrence where those cameras have been tampered with.
Just to add, just to give a bit of background, so the LVVR, so the locomotive voice and video recorders, is a system that that is fairly recent in Canada. They have started being implemented in locomotive just a few years ago, so it's still fairly recent. Just give a bit of background.
Rowan, do you have a follow-up?
I don't think so. I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'll let my colleagues online take a minute to see if they have any other questions, and in the meantime, I'll ask one. But on a broader topic, I wonder if you could talk at all about, do you have any concerns about the transportation safety in Canada as it relates to the changes the Americans are making? The U.S., the Trump administration wants to roll back a lot of regulations, a lot of different oversight. I mean, we must have a very interconnected transport system. Does that give you any pause?
Well, so you're right. The railway system across Canada and the U.S. are very much integrated, which is why, we were happy to see that the U.S. have implemented positive train control on their network. It is a positive thing that they did on their side that we don't currently have in Canada. So, we would very much like the regulator, Transport Canada, in our case, to move ahead and implement not necessarily the U.S. version of it, but at least a type of system that has equivalent defenses to protect against trains. So, of course, for us in Canada, the approach is not to roll back regulations; it's to add additional layer of defenses to protect against these types of occurrences.
But just, more broadly, as you watch the Trump administration they just seem so focused on rolling back regulation for airlines, for shipping, does that give us pause? Can we rely now still on our American counterparts when they're bringing things into our country to keep our roads and railways and ports and all of these things safe?
Mm-hmm. Well, at the TSB, we focus on the Canadian situation. So, we identify the risks and the safety deficiencies from the Canadian perspective. So, I don't necessarily want to comment on the situation in the U.S. as you can understand, but from our perspective, there needs to be additional layer of defenses. So, rolling back regulations here is not the way to go from our perspective.
And I do see that Sid Banerjee with the Canadian Press has a question online. Go ahead, Sid.
Hi, I just had a question about, you mentioned that the Canadian trains that go to the US are equipped with this PTC system. So I'm just wondering if you have a number, like what proportion of trains have that, Canadian trains have that system already? So like you were talking about, it's still a few years away before the entire system or the Canadian version of it can be implemented.
We don't have that type of information. The railway companies themselves could probably better answer that question. But we know that all mainline trains are susceptible to go between the two countries. So my educated guess would be the vast majority of those locomotives are equipped with a PTC system.
Do you have a follow-up, Sid?
Yeah, just so in that case, why will it take, if these trains are already equipped with this system, but you were saying that the system that we're developing in Canada would not necessarily be exactly the same as the one in the US, correct?
That is correct. But to your question, the PTC is not only systems that are present in locomotives. There's a lot of overhead systems that need to be put in place as well. There was every turnouts, every switch in on the track have to be linked to the PTC or the enhanced train control system to be effective. There's a lot of things that have to be put in place on top of the locomotives for PTC or enhanced train control to be effective.
Yeah. And even if, Transport Canada went ahead and decided to start, implementing PTC or the Canadian equivalent of it, tomorrow, we would still be many years away before the system is fully operational, which, is why we're coming out today with the recommendation to have interim measures in place until the system is fully operational, because it is going to take a number of years before it is operational. So we need something to fix the safety deficiencies while this is being put in place.
And for a last round, we'll go back to Eric Atkins. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. What interim measures would you like to see in place before PTC is ever implemented?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a number of options that can be put in place by the regulator and or the industry. So we don't want to mandate something specific, but I can give you a few examples to illustrate my point. So technology in recent years, especially GPS location technology, has become very affordable, very accessible. QNSNL, which is a railway operating on the North Shore of Quebec, have implemented a GPS-based system on their locomotive, which will send an alert to crews if their locomotive gets too close to another train on the track. So that is one example of a system that is simple, that was implemented by a railway currently operating in Canada, and that is very effective at flagging these risks when two trains get too close to each other. The other options would be to implement additional layers so that crews are not distracted within locomotives. They can also implement speed restrictions for trains, just to give you a few examples.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll conclude today's press conference. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.